It was a cold winter evening in a small American town. Officer James Calloway, a 10-year veteran of the local police department, was on patrol. Over the years, he had developed a reputation. Some saw him as a dedicated officer, while others, particularly those from the town's black community, viewed him as a cop who often overstepped his authority. Complaints about his behavior had been filed, but they always seemed to get buried under bureaucracy. As he drove down a dimly lit street, his eyes caught a sleek black SUV that had just made a turn without signaling. With a smirk, he flicked on his lights and pulled up behind the vehicle. Inside the SUV sat Commander Maya Brooks, a high-ranking Navy SEAL who had spent years leading classified missions overseas. She was dressed casually, black jeans, a leather jacket, and a beanie covering her neatly braided hair. She had just returned home from deployment, looking forward to some peace, but she had encountered enough power-hungry officers in her career to know that this stop was about more than just a traffic violation. As she watched the flashing lights in her rearview mirror, Maya took a deep breath, her instincts kicking in. This wasn't the battlefield, but it sure felt like one. She calmly rolled down her window as Calloway approached. "License and registration," he barked, shining his flashlight directly into her face. Maya didn't flinch. "Good evening, officer. May I ask why I'm being pulled over?" "You failed to signal that turn back there," he said, his tone clipped. Maya nodded. "I see. My apologies." She reached for her purse, moving slowly and deliberately. "I'm retrieving my license now." Calloway watched her, eyes narrowing as if searching for an excuse to escalate the situation. "Step out of the vehicle," he suddenly ordered. Maya raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? Is there a reason you need me to step out?" "Are you refusing?" he shot back, his hand drifting toward his holster. Maya clenched her jaw, suppressing the urge to challenge him outright. Instead, she took a deep breath. "I'm complying, officer." She unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out, standing tall, her military training evident in her posture. Calloway looked her up and down, his prejudice clouding his judgment. To him, she was just another black woman who needed to be put in her place. "Turn around, hands on the car," he ordered. Maya's eyes darkened. "For what reason?" "Suspicion of resisting. I need to search you." Maya knew her rights, and she also knew that Calloway had no legitimate reason to frisk her. But she also knew how quickly situations like this could escalate. Instead of resisting, she locked eyes with him. "If you're unlawfully detaining me, I want your badge number." Calloway smirked. "You can get all that later. For now, you do what I say." He roughly patted her down, his movements unprofessional and invasive. Maya gritted her teeth, but didn't react. "Where are you coming from?" he asked. "My house," she said evenly. "Where are you headed?" "Also my house." Calloway sneered. He didn't like the way she spoke, calm, unwavering, in control. He thrived on intimidation, but she wasn't intimidated. "All right, here's the deal," he said, stepping back. "I smell something suspicious in your vehicle. I have reason to believe you might be in possession of narcotics." Maya's eyes narrowed. "That's a lie." "Excuse me?" Calloway shot back, his arrogance growing. "You don't smell anything, because there's nothing to smell. I don't do drugs, officer." Calloway's smirk widened. "Then you won't mind if I search your car?" Maya folded her arms. "Without probable cause or a warrant? Yes, I do mind." Calloway's patience snapped. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Maya's military instincts flared. She was a combat veteran, a trained strategist, and she could dismantle him in seconds if she wanted to. But she knew this wasn't the time or place. Instead, she exhaled slowly. "I am not resisting," she said firmly. "You're making a mistake." Calloway didn't care. He pulled out his handcuffs, yanking her hands behind her back and slapping the cuffs on. Maya let him, knowing that fighting back now would only give him the excuse he was looking for. "You're under arrest," he declared. "For what?" she asked coolly. "Obstruction of justice," he lied. Maya didn't respond. She knew the truth. She knew her rights. And she knew this would come back to haunt him. As Calloway shoved her toward his patrol car, he had no idea that he had just made the biggest mistake of his career. He didn't know that Maya Brooks was not just any woman. She was a decorated Navy SEAL commander. And soon, he would find out. A week had passed since the arrest, and Officer James Calloway walked into the courtroom with confidence. He had played this game before, twisting the truth, embellishing details, making minor traffic stops into something bigger than they actually were. Most of the time, people like Maya Brooks had no real power to fight back. At least, that's what he thought. He had no idea who he was up against. Maya sat at the defendant's table, her posture straight, her face calm, but unreadable. She had been through more stressful situations in combat zones than most people could imagine. A courtroom was nothing compared to an active battlefield, and she knew that the truth was on her side. Her attorney, Victor Reveal, a sharp and aggressive defense lawyer with a reputation for tearing apart corrupt cops on the witness stand, sat beside her. As the judge entered, everyone stood. "Court is now in session," the bailiff announced. The prosecutor, a state-appointed lawyer named Elaine Carter, stepped up first. She had worked with Calloway before, and while she wasn't fully convinced of his honesty, she had a job to do. "Your Honor, the state will prove that the defendant, Ms. Maya Brooks, refused to comply with a lawful order and resisted arrest." Maya barely reacted. She let them have their moment, knowing it wouldn't last. Calloway took the stand first. As he walked up, he gave Maya a smug glance, as if he had already won. "Officer Calloway," Carter began, "can you describe what happened on the night of the arrest?" "Yes, ma'am," Calloway said, sitting tall in his uniform. "I was on routine patrol when I observed the defendant failing to signal a turn. I initiated a lawful traffic stop, but she became aggressive and refused to cooperate. I asked her to step out of the vehicle for my safety, and she continued to resist, questioning my authority." Maya remained silent, watching him lie with such ease. "What happened next?" Carter pressed. "I noticed a strong odor coming from her vehicle, which led me to believe there were illegal substances inside. When I attempted to search the car, she refused, and I had no choice but to detain her for obstruction." Victor Reveal leaned forward, barely able to hide his amusement. The moment he had been waiting for had arrived. "Your Honor," he said, standing up, "I would like to cross-examine the witness." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Revel approached Calloway with slow, calculated steps. "Officer Calloway, you said my client was aggressive. Can you define what you mean by that?" Calloway shifted slightly. "She was confrontational. She kept questioning my orders." "So asking why she was being pulled over and asking for your badge number counts as aggressive?" "Well, she had an attitude," Calloway said, a slight hesitation creeping into his voice. Revel smirked. "Oh, an attitude. Did she yell at you?" "No." "Did she threaten you?" "No." Revel turned to the jury. "So, to be clear, my client, a law-abiding citizen, calmly asked why she was being pulled over and requested your badge number, and that, according to you, was aggressive? Calloway clenched his jaw. I felt she was being uncooperative. Uncooperative, Revel repeated. Let's move on. You stated that you smelled something illegal in her vehicle. Did you find any drugs? Calloway hesitated. No. No? Revel repeated, pretending to be surprised. That's odd because you just testified that you smelled something suspicious. Are you saying you imagined it? Calloway's face turned red. I was acting on my experience. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts. Oh, instincts, Revel said, pacing slightly. So your instinct told you that she was a criminal? Calloway hesitated again. Let's talk about my client's vehicle, Revel continued, picking up a document from the defense table. Officer, are you aware that my client's car has been searched and tested for any illegal substances? Calloway's face twitched slightly. No. Revel held up a piece of paper. This is the official report from the forensic team. They found zero evidence of drugs in her car, not a single trace, not even a faint scent. The courtroom was silent. Revel turned to the jury. So, Officer Calloway, let's summarize. My client was polite, followed the law, had nothing illegal in her car, and yet you arrested her anyway. Do you still claim you had probable cause? Calloway's confidence was starting to crack. Before he could respond, Revel took another step closer. And one more thing, he said, his tone shifting. Are you aware of my client's occupation? Calloway frowned. She's, just some woman who thought she could get away with resisting arrest. Revel's smirk widened. Oh, that's interesting because my client is Commander Maya Brooks, a decorated Navy SEAL who has served this country for over a decade. Murmurs filled the courtroom. Calloway's face paled. Revel didn't stop. So tell me, officer, do you really think a highly trained SEAL who has risked her life for this country would suddenly resist arrest over a minor traffic stop? Or is it possible that you targeted her based on something else? Calloway looked like he wanted to disappear. Maya finally spoke. Her voice was calm, but firm. You arrested me because you thought I was just another person you could push around, she said, locking eyes with him. But you had no idea who I was. The weight of her words settled over the courtroom, and for the first time, Officer Calloway realized he was in serious trouble. The silence in the courtroom was suffocating. Officer James Calloway's face was frozen in shock, his mind racing as the weight of his mistake settled in. He had falsely arrested Commander Maya Brooks, a high-ranking Navy SEAL, thinking she was just another person he could bully into submission. But now, standing in front of a packed courtroom, under the sharp gaze of Maya's defense attorney, Victor Revel, he was trapped. Revel let the tension build before speaking again. Officer Calloway, I have a few more questions. His voice was calm, but there was a dangerous edge to it. Calloway swallowed hard. Go ahead. Revel glanced at the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit B, body cam footage from the night of the arrest. The prosecutor, Elaine Carter, shifted uncomfortably. Objection, Your Honor. The defense did not disclose this in pretrial. Revel turned, raising an eyebrow. Objection? The prosecution had access to this footage just like we did. If they failed to review it, that's not my client's fault. The judge nodded. Overruled. Let's see the footage. A court officer wheeled a TV screen to the front of the room, plugging in a USB. The screen flickered to life. The footage began. It showed Calloway walking up to Maya's car, his flashlight shining in her face. License and registration, he said sharply. Maya's voice was calm and measured. May I ask why I'm being stopped? You failed to signal that turn. I understand. I apologize for that. Then, the footage showed what Calloway didn't mention, his immediate aggression. Step out of the car, he ordered, before she even reached for her license. Maya's voice remained steady. May I ask why? Calloway's voice sharpened. Step outside, now. In the courtroom, whispers spread. The footage continued, showing Maya complying, moving slowly and deliberately. Then came the most damning part, Calloway falsely claiming to smell narcotics. The body cam proved there was no hesitation in his voice, no moment where he genuinely sniffed the air. Just a clear, deliberate lie. Then, the final blow. Calloway's own words. You people always think you can talk your way out of things. A collective gasp filled the courtroom. The judge's expression darkened. The jury exchanged glances. Calloway's career was imploding in real time. Revel turned back to him. Officer Calloway, do you deny that this is your voice? Calloway's mouth went dry. I was just doing my job. Revel didn't blink. So lying, unlawfully detaining an innocent woman, and racially profiling her is your job? The prosecutor, Elaine Carter, buried her face in her hands. There was no coming back from this. Revel continued. You've had multiple complaints filed against you, haven't you? Calloway's jaw clenched. Revel didn't let him answer. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, we have documented evidence of at least 9 complaints of racial bias, excessive force, and unlawful searches against Officer Calloway. And yet, nothing was ever done. Calloway's superior, Captain Harris, was sitting in the back of the courtroom. His face was stone cold, but his eyes revealed what he was thinking. This is bad. Very bad. The judge leaned forward. Officer Calloway, do you have an explanation for these complaints? Calloway was sweating now. Those were misunderstandings. Revel let out a humorless laugh. Misunderstandings? 9 times? More whispers spread. Calloway knew he was drowning. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by panic. Maya finally spoke. Her voice was calm, but firm. You thought you could get away with it, didn't you? She said, staring directly at Calloway. You've done it before. You lie, you manipulate the system, and you think no one will challenge you. But this time, you picked the wrong person. Calloway didn't answer. He couldn't. The judge sighed. Given the evidence presented, I am strongly considering dismissing all charges against Ms. Brooks immediately. Additionally, I will be forwarding a report regarding Officer Calloway's conduct to the appropriate authorities. Calloway's world collapsed. Maya Brooks wasn't just any woman. She was a warrior, and she had just exposed him for exactly what he was. The courtroom was still buzzing from the explosive body cam footage. Officer James Calloway, once so smug and confident, sat rigid in the witness chair. His face was pale, sweat glistening on his forehead. His hands clenched the armrests so tightly, his knuckles turned white. The judge had just hinted at dismissing all charges against Commander Maya Brooks, and Calloway knew what was coming next. His entire career was unraveling before his eyes. But the storm was just beginning. Victor Revel wasn't finished. The defense attorney paced in front of the jury, letting the weight of what had just been revealed sink in. He turned back to Calloway, his voice sharp. Officer Calloway, let's talk about those 9 complaints against you. The prosecutor, Elaine Carter, shifted in her seat. She had worked with police officers for years. but this was the first time she had seen one of them so completely exposed. Revel continued, holding up a thick folder. These reports detail accusations of racial profiling, excessive force, and unlawful detainment, dating back 7 years. He flipped through the pages. Several of these complaints were dismissed without a full investigation. Would you like to explain why? Calloway gritted his teeth. I don't control internal investigations. Revel smirked. That's true. But would you say you've had a friendly relationship with your department's internal affairs office? Calloway glared at him. I do my job. That's all. Revel pulled out another paper. This is a signed affidavit from an anonymous officer in your own department. It states that you were often tipped off about complaints before they were formally investigated, allowing you to cover your tracks. Would you like to respond to that? Calloway's face turned an even deeper shade of red. This is ridiculous. Revel didn't let up. Ridiculous or accurate? Before Calloway could respond, Revel turned to the judge. Your Honor, I move for an official investigation into Officer Calloway's pattern of misconduct. The judge steepled his fingers, deep in thought. Finally, he spoke. I must say, the evidence against Officer Calloway is troubling. I will be forwarding this matter to the state's Attorney General for review. Maya watched the scene unfold, her expression unreadable. She had dealt with corrupt figures before, foreign and domestic. But there was something uniquely satisfying about watching Calloway fall under the weight of his own lies. The judge turned to her. Commander Brooks, you have been unjustly detained and humiliated due to the actions of this officer. I hereby dismiss all charges against you with prejudice, meaning they cannot be refiled. A rush of relief spread through the courtroom. Maya gave a small nod, not surprised, but grateful that justice was being served. Then, the judge's gaze darkened as he turned back to Calloway. As for you, Officer Calloway, I find your testimony deeply concerning. Given the evidence presented today, I am referring this case to the Department of Justice for a civil rights violation investigation. Gasps spread through the room. Calloway stiffened. The DOJ was now involved. His career, his freedom, was in jeopardy. But then came the final blow. Revel cleared his throat. One last thing, Your Honor. My client intends to file a civil lawsuit against Officer Calloway and the Department for wrongful arrest, racial profiling, and emotional distress. Calloway shot up from his seat. This is a setup. She's just trying to make me look bad. Revel turned to him, smiling coldly. You did that all by yourself, officer. Maya finally stood, her presence commanding. She didn't need to gloat. She had already won. Looking Calloway directly in the eyes, she simply said, You picked the wrong woman. Calloway had no response. His reign of unchecked power was over. And Commander Maya Brooks? She was walking out of this courtroom, a free woman, while he faced the consequences of his corruption. The courtroom had emptied, but the weight of what had just transpired lingered in the air. Officer James Calloway had walked in expecting an easy win, another manipulated case, another victim who wouldn't be able to fight back. Instead, he left with his career in ruins, a pending DOJ investigation, and the looming threat of a civil lawsuit. But for Commander Maya Brooks, the fight wasn't over yet. The city's police oversight committee had opened an official hearing into Calloway's conduct. The evidence from Maya's case had unraveled a web of corruption, not just his own, but a system that had protected him for years. As the hearing began, Captain Harris, Calloway's superior, took the stand. He looked like a man carrying the weight of his department's failures. The lead investigator, Sarah Jennings, leaned forward. "Captain Harris, are you aware of Officer Calloway's pattern of racial profiling and unlawful arrests?" Harris cleared his throat. I had heard rumors." Jennings raised an eyebrow. "Rumors? Officer Calloway had 9 complaints filed against him. Are you saying you never looked into them?" Harris hesitated. "The complaints were reviewed, but no concrete action was taken." Jennings didn't let him off the hook. "Why not?" Harris sighed. "Because Calloway had friends in the right places." A murmur spread through the room. Maya, sitting in the back with her attorney Victor Revel, remained still. She had known it all along. This wasn't just about Calloway. Jennings nodded. "And are you aware that Calloway received warnings about investigations before they even started?" Harris exhaled sharply. "Yes." "Who tipped him off?" Silence. Jennings leaned in. "Captain, I'll remind you that lying under oath will land you in the same situation as Calloway." Harris rubbed his temples. Finally, he spoke. "Deputy Chief Wallace." Gasps filled the room. Maya's jaw tightened. The corruption went even higher than she thought. Jennings flipped through her papers. "So let's get this straight. Deputy Chief Wallace protected Calloway, covering up misconduct, and in turn, Calloway felt emboldened to target innocent civilians." Harris nodded. "Yes." Jennings turned to the panel. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is not just about one bad officer. This is about an entire system that let him operate without consequence." The hearing ended with a formal recommendation for Calloway's termination and the immediate opening of an internal corruption probe into Deputy Chief Wallace. For Calloway, there was no coming back. Maya's lawsuit against Calloway and the department moved forward fast, thanks to the overwhelming evidence. The city wanted to settle, but Maya refused. She didn't just want money. She wanted accountability. In court, Calloway's lawyer tried to paint him as a dedicated officer who made a mistake. But Revel destroyed that argument in minutes. "This wasn't a mistake," Revel said to the jury. "This was a pattern." By the time the trial ended, Calloway's financial future was just as ruined as his career. The jury ruled in Maya's favor, awarding her $2.7 million in damages. As the verdict was read, Calloway slumped in his seat, staring blankly ahead. The once powerful officer was now a disgraced, unemployed, and financially ruined man. And Maya? She walked out of the courtroom victorious. Maya had donated half of her settlement to organizations focused on police reform and legal defense for falsely accused individuals. She knew this wasn't just about her. She had a platform now, a voice. During an interview on national television, the host asked her, "Commander Brooks, do you think this case will change things?" Maya folded her hands and looked into the camera. "This was never just about me," she said. "It was about exposing a system that allowed corrupt officers like Calloway to operate unchecked. If my case can help prevent even one more innocent person from going through what I did, then it was worth it." The host nodded. "And Calloway?" Maya smirked slightly. "Let's just say he learned a valuable lesson." James Calloway never worked in law enforcement again. The DOJ barred him from serving as an officer anywhere in the country. With no income and a ruined reputation, he spiraled into obscurity, just another disgraced cop who thought he was untouchable. But Maya Brooks? She walked away stronger than ever. She had won. And more importantly, she had made sure the next James Calloway wouldn't get away with it.